In this video, I will be going over the similarities between C.S. Lewis and Abel, the Weeknd Tesfaye. Also, I've attempted to record this video several times, so I just wanted the viewer to beware. When I read some of the Weeknd's lyrics, they sound incredibly cringy. But, here goes. All get what they want, they do not always like it. This line was spoken by the great lion, Aslan, in the book called The Magician's Nephew, written by C.S. Lewis. The context of the aforementioned line is a response to a sequence of events that results from an evil witch sneaking into a garden which has a sign at the gates reading, "Come in by the gold gates, or not at all. Take of my fruit for others, or forbear. For those who steal and climb my wall shall find their heart's desire and find despair." The garden is full of delicious magical apples that have the power to fulfill the desires of anyone who partakes in them. The hero of this story, a young boy named Diggory, follows the advice of the poem written on the wall and enters the garden through the golden gates. Instead of selfishly keeping the fruit to himself, he uses the fruit for the greater good and uses it to save his mother from a mortal illness and also to plant a tree in the center of Narnia which casts a spell of protection over the land. On the other hand, the evil witch does not enter the garden by the gates but instead leaps over the wall, signifying that she cares not for the rules or for the well-being of others. Instead of using the magical fruit for good, she ravenously consumes it and grants herself the wish of immortality. But instead of finding peace from attaining her desires, she becomes the cursed white witch, who is the villain of a later story within the Narnia universe, and finds endless despair. The great lion, Aslan, explains her situation, saying, "That is what happens to those who pluck and eat the fruits at the wrong time and in the wrong place. The fruit is good, but they loathe it ever after. She, the white witch, has won her heart's desire. She has unwearying strength and endless days like a goddess. But length of days with an evil heart is only length of misery, and she already begins to know it. All get what they want, they do not always like it." In other words, everyone gets what they want. But what some people want does not lead to their fulfillment, but instead leads to horror and despair, especially if what they want is completely selfish and cruel. The story of the White Witch and the hero Diggory is not about magic fruit, but about what happens when someone pursues pleasure at any cost. They may find their heart's desire, but they will also find despair. At face value, there is not much in common between the 20th century author C.S. Lewis and the 21st century R&B artist known as The Weeknd. C.S. Lewis wrote fantasy novels and philosophical works discussing Christianity and the afterlife, while The Weeknd makes songs about sex, drugs, and also briefly touches on matters of religion. But both of them make use of a literary device known as allegory, and both artists have similar themes that permeate their artistic endeavors. In this video essay, I will be comparing the works of these two artists, and I will be taking some creative freedoms with my interpretation of their works, but I hope I don't stray too far from the artist's original intent. I think you too will recognize the similarities between these two artists and see how two creatives are able to use allegory to convey similar messages in their art. Let us relate the story of the magic fruit and the magician's nephew with a similar allegory found within the Weeknd's music, for if we look closely, we can see the same story being played out. Since the beginning of the Weeknd's discography, we can see that what he wants above all else is to attain his heart's desire, which is to gratify his pleasure-seeking ways and to reach the famed cities of Los Angeles and Las Vegas, as well as acquiring the fame and stardom that come along with it. In the song called The Morning on the Weeknd's first studio album known as Trilogy, he says that Cali is the mission. And there is a song named Heaven or Las Vegas on that same album. In a later song called Faith on the world-renowned After Hours album, The Weeknd says, "I choose Vegas if they offer Heaven's Gate," further solidifying the notion that his heart's desire lies with reaching fame, acclaim, and the attainment of pleasure over everything else, a sentiment which is similar to the White Witch from Narnia, who chooses to scale the walls of the garden and partake in the forbidden fruit instead of entering the garden through the golden gates and using the fruit for the benefit of others. The Weeknd does not want heaven. He wants to gratify his own selfish desires and chooses a life of debauchery in Las Vegas. This message is also seen in the song Wicked Games, where The Weeknd says, "Bring your love, baby, I can bring my shame. Bring the drugs, baby, I can bring my pain. And later, give me all of it, I need all of it to myself." Those words, "I need all of it to myself," are perhaps the exact words that the White Witch said to herself when looking upon the fruit of the garden. Furthermore, they show that the Weeknd, like the White Witch, is selfishly pursuing his own desires at the expense of others, hence why his pursuits are indeed wicked games. The Weeknd's forbidden fruit is the numbing of his pain by using women and fame to conjure up enough pleasure to outweigh his despair. But just like the White Witch who ate the magic fruit in the wrong way and at the wrong time, he finds that achieving his heart's desire provides momentary pleasure, but in the long run it only leads to more despair. We can also find this same message of selfish pleasure leading to momentary happiness but long-term affliction echoing throughout the writings of C.S. Lewis. Specifically, we see that the pursuit of pleasure above all else can lead to confinement. In a later book in the Narnia series called The Silver Chair, a young prince named Ryllian finds a beautiful, mysterious woman clad in a dress of dazzling green. His friends suspect treachery of this woman, but the young prince wants nothing more than to win the affections of her love. And so he does. He gets what he wants. But the woman turns out to be an evil sorceress who casts an injurious spell upon him, taking him prisoner in a cell deep underground where he is bound fast to a silver chair. The attainment of this desire leads not to freedom, but entrapment and despair. This same idea of pleasure leading to imprisonment can be found in the Weeknd's music. In the aforementioned song called Faith, the Weeknd finally reaches the city of his desire, Las Vegas. Blinded by the sex, drugs, and pleasure he finds within the city, he sings that he has lost his faith and finds himself trapped at the end of the song in a flashing car. The flashing lights of Las Vegas lured him in like a moth to a flame, and the fulfillment of reaching the city of his desires leads to his imprisonment in a police vehicle, hence the flashing car. This same message can be seen in the song Escape from L.A., which is also on the After Hours album, where the Weeknd is enticed by his desires to have sex with a woman inside of a recording studio. When the woman walks into the studio, she locks the door behind her, signifying that, like Prince Ryllian, he is locked in a prison of his own desires. Both the Weeknd and Prince Ryllian got what they wanted, and both found themselves imprisoned and full of despair, which is why the Weeknd sings in that same song. This place is never what it seems. Take me out, L.A. Take me out of L.A. This place will be the end of me. Take me out, L.A. Take me out of L.A. After reaching the city he always wanted since the beginning of his career, he wants to leave, further solidifying the idea spoken by Aslan. All get what they want, but they do not always like it. Another idea that I will cover showing the similarity between the works of C.S. Lewis and the Weeknd is a combination and continuation of the first two ideas, which were that everyone gets what they want and they don't always like it, and that the relentless pursuit of pleasure ends up being a prison of one's own making. This idea is this, that humans will prefer a false reality of their own creation on their own terms, rather than to accept reality, which requires us to sacrifice our own personal desires and give up the things we want in order to align ourselves with the highest good. In The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis, a novel about a character who begins his journey of ascending from hell and entering the realm of purgatory, the main character sees several lost souls who are given the choice to enter the gates of heaven, but instead choose to return to hell. The protagonist, who is not named in the novel, asks of his mentor who is guiding him through purgatory, what do they choose, these souls who go back to hell? And how can they choose it? His guide responds as follows. The choice of every lost soul can be expressed in the words, better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven. There is always something they insist on keeping, even at the price of misery. There is always something they prefer to joy, that is, to reality. This theme is found in several of the Weeknd songs. I've already mentioned the line from Faith, I choose Vegas if they offer Heaven's Gate, and in the title track on After Hours, the Weeknd says, put myself to sleep, just so I can get closer to you inside my dreams. Didn't want to wake up lest you were beside me. And also, I was running away from facing reality, wasting all of my time on living my fantasies. He chose the fantasy where he gets his desire rather than accepting reality, and he regrets it. He was acting like one of the lost souls in the Great Divorce. Why, you might ask, would someone then choose something that isn't real over something that is? The answer is simple. Why then would anyone watch porn instead of having sex within the context of a real relationship? Well, one requires you to better yourself, which is hard, and and the alternative of choosing the fantasy is easy and requires no such sacrifices. The choice between heaven and Las Vegas is more difficult than we may like to admit. Inquiring further of the lost souls in the Great Divorce, the protagonist asks if there is any hope for those lost souls to enter heaven. He is met with the answer, "Everyone who wishes it does enters heaven. Never fear. There are only two kinds of people in the end, those who say to God, 'Thy will be done,' and to those whom God says, 'Thy will be done.' All that are in hell choose it. Without that self-choice, there could be no hell. No soul that seriously and constantly desires joy will ever miss it. Those who seek find. To those who knock, it is opened." Again, this is found in the previously mentioned song, Heaven or Las Vegas, where the Weeknd says, "They say they want heaven. They say they want God. I say I have heaven. Well, I say I am God." This describes the two kinds of people C.S. Lewis just talked about. In this song, the Weeknd is again one of those lost souls who is choosing his own fantasy of being God over reality, which requires one to bend the knee to a higher purpose. Also, I want to make light of one more point. What are these lost souls to do if they are to escape hell in the Great Divorce? If they are to break free of the underground dungeon in the silver chair? If they are to break out of the recording studio and escape from LA or the back of the police car in faith? Both C.S. Lewis and the Weeknd provide an answer in their work. In the Great Divorce, lost souls can be found again if they align their will with God's. In the silver chair, Prince Rylien escapes by killing the evil sorceress, destroying the silver chair to which he was bound, and eventually digs himself out of the underground lair and sees the stars in the sky again. In the Weeknd's music, he faces reality, and in the music video for the closing song of the After Hours album called Until I Bleed Out, he cuts the woman of his fantasy out of his dreams, and in the music video, he rises from an underground party and escapes into the surrounding desert. After rising above the blinding lights of the party, the Weeknd finds himself in the desert, a place between heaven and Las Vegas, like the Israelites who escaped Egypt and entered the wilderness, a place between slavery and the Promised Land. In the Weeknd's most recent studio album called Dawn FM, which is described as the artist himself as a depiction of purgatory, we see the lost soul of the Weeknd kill off his old self in the music video in one of the opening tracks named Gasoline, with the lyrics, "And if I finally die in peace, just wrap my body in these sheets and pour out the gasoline, it don't mean much to me." My interpretation of these lyrics in this video is that he is finally dying to his old self and embracing change into a better creature. I understand that the intended meaning of the video is that the pursuit of pleasure at any cost is causing pain to his older self in the form of regrets and emptiness, but without alternative interpretations, there can be no depth to art. I digress. Back to the main point of escaping darkness. In the closing track of the Dawn FM album called Phantom Regret, it is stated, "You gotta be heaven to see heaven," which is similar to the words of C.S. Lewis, who said that those who enter say to God, "Thy will be done." Furthermore, in that same song, it is explained that one must act like a flower and open their petals and turn to the light. And also, you gotta unwind your mind, train your soul to align, and dance till you find that divine boogaloo, which again mirrors the alignment of the soul with God's will in the Great Divorce. This differs greatly from the Weeknd's previous music, which could be interpreted as the grieving of a lost soul who has chosen his own fantasy over reality, further exemplified by his pursuit of the tempting lights of Las Vegas in the song Blinding Lights. But instead of gaining vision and enlightenment, the Weeknd was blinded, hence showing that the lights beaming from Las Vegas are different from the light we are told to align with at the end of Dawn FM. The lights of Vegas are blinding, like complete darkness, and are contrasted by the light of which C.S. Lewis sees the world, writing, "I believe in Christianity as I believe in the sun, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. That light is not blinding, but enlightening." In other words, in order to escape the entrapment caused by the pursuit of our false desires, we must align our souls with the true light and face reality, in which case we will be saved. Both C.S. Lewis and the Weeknd seem to convey this message. We come to an uncomfortable truth found from the art of both of these creatives, namely, the oft-repeated adage that everyone gets what they want, and they do not always like it, especially when the things we want are not good for ourselves. Another hard truth. We do not inherently want what is best for ourselves, as seen by Prince Rylian, who wants the woman in the dazzling green dress. She leads to his imprisonment in a dungeon deep underground. We see this in the numerous people in the Great Divorce who choose hell on their own accord rather than to enter heaven, which requires them to sacrifice something they desperately want. We see this in the White Witch, who wanted to keep the fruit for herself rather than doing what is right. We see this in the Weeknd, who, as shown before, chooses Vegas instead of heaven in the song Faith, and who later admits in the song After Hours that he was wasting his time chasing a fantasy instead of facing reality. If we wanted what was best for ourselves, we would then have no need for mentors, for the advice of friends, the guidance of parents, or the teachings of religions or other creeds. In other words, we become our own God if we think that we inherently want what is best for ourselves. Even if you are an atheist, this alignment with God found in C.S. Lewis in The Weeknd does not have to mean God per se, but this could be taken as the subjugation of your own personal desires to a higher cause, when what you want is inherently selfish. And I am in no way saying that one who does not believe in religion cannot be a moral or just person. Far from it. But in order to act rightly, one's desires cannot be their own guiding principle in life, and this is the message found in the creations of both of these artists. You can be your own God if that is what you want. But a close look at the Weeknd's music and C.S. Lewis's writings show that by default, a life led by this belief results in you putting yourself in a delusional fantasy world that is destined to be more of a prison than anything else. This has been a comparison of C.S. Lewis and Abel, the Weeknd Tesfaye.